So we're on, so we'll move on to our 6.6 presentation by the Lake Area Planning Council on the Wildfire Preparedness and Evacuation Plan.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'll quickly open that up. We're going to hear today from Faith Newton, who is working with our Lake Area Planning Council, and she's going to give us a presentation on this wildfire preparedness and evacuation plan. And Faith, if you have okay, we already had it, so turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Board, for the opportunity to present to you this morning. As mentioned, my name is Faith Newton. I work with a company called the Resiliency Initiative, and we were hired by Lake Area Planning Council to create the Lake County Wildfire Preparedness and Evacuation Plan. And it's my privilege to provide you an update on that project as we are wrapping it up for you today. So overall, our purpose and objective was to create this wildfire evacuation and preparedness plan, looking at identifying and mitigating risk, specifically around wildfires, looking at evacuation routes, communication procedures, and overall coordination protocol for the entirety of Lake County. We did this with advice and guidance through a technical advisory group throughout the entirety of this project, working with key stakeholders in the response mechanism, as well as community engagement and involvement. The base and foundation for this evacuation plan is the hazard profile of wildfire risk for Lake County. We also matched this profile and overall risk update to the Lake County Hazard Mitigation Plan, which you actually will see a presentation on later today as well. So making sure that we're planning and aligning our planning procedures for the county with consistent data across our planning assumptions. First and foremost, we created a preparedness memo as we took this information in and understood Lake County and the jurisdictions we were planning for, the communities we were planning for, and created this memo. This memo is available on the Lake APC website. Within it, we took a look at the demographics, again, to understand the county, make sure we're looking at our vulnerable populations, where they exist, and overall the communities within Lake County. We took a look from different data sources to understand the demographics, how that breaks down, looking at, again, not only the hazards and that risk index at a county level, but as individual communities and jurisdictions within the county. We also did a survey, which is where some of our data comes from, to pull from community members and community leaders, and making sure we have that true data understanding, not just data points that are found in our report. As I mentioned, the survey, this was presented out to the community at the end of 2024. As we've been working on this for quite some time, we had 243 different respondents who provided us input, again, to really understand the community we were working with, not just a number and a data point on the screen. Those survey results in their entirety are an annex to our memo, also again available on the Lake APC website. And then that was incorporated into our overall recommendations that were presented with that memo of how we can maybe continue to improve the elements of evacuation planning and education and overall preparedness around wildfire evacuation in Lake County. Today, I want to give you a high-level overview of those recommendations. We had three major buckets that we looped those into, and it was emergency communications, trainings, exercises, and drills, and overall network improvements. You can see on the screen, and if you look at the entirety of that memo with the recommendations, we have specific recommendations outlined. Those are also looking at potential projects that could happen for Lake County. There's also recommendations of potential grants that could support those, and the need for those based on our assessment, again, pulling from all of the data that we worked through and the input from the community in the survey. Ultimately, our project was aiming towards the Lake County evacuation plan. We've had this plan out for final comment and final draft with our technical advisory group. It's been available on the Lake APC website. and want to present kind of the high-level components of this plan to you all today. Our plan structure is consistent with the Lake County Emergency Operations Plan, as it is not here to replace existing processes and protocols. This is an addition and an elevation, if you will, to the evacuation process. It is looking at that coordination and communication primarily from a response mechanism and the response agencies across Lake County and multi-jurisdictions. This really dives into different strategies and potentials. As we know, wildfires are not consistent. They can come from any direction and start at any location. And so therefore, evacuation has to be available to move within a framework. And this is a documented framework for Lake County to work through. Throughout this planning process and with the guidance of our technical advisory group, we do have key definitions that are consistent across our plan, the organizations and jurisdictions involved in a response, as well as those outside of Lake County. So when we look at California assets from Cal Office of Emergency Services, California Fire, and other municipal mutual aid partners that would be involved in a response. So defining those for an evacuation order, a warning, and when an order is lifted. So that way we're all working on the same language to understand that that order is that lawful decree to leave the area. The warning is the potential for the threat with the order lifted being that formal evacuation order being removed from that area. Additionally, we talked through definitions and agreed upon the hard closure, soft closure, and a resident-only closure. This is typically looking at when you've had an evacuation and you're returning back to that area of the community and making sure that the right people and the right groups are getting back into an area and making sure we get, as in a hard closure, fire and law enforcement back in to make sure that that area is secure. Soft closure, we're getting critical infrastructure and utilities, residents only, making sure, again, we're working with the community to keep that consistent, not having anyone and everyone coming back after that disruption to the community and that evacuation. Additionally, this plan is built off of what is called Unified Command. Again, this is consistent with Lake County Office of Emergency Services and the Emergency Operations Plan. So every disaster starts local, which is why that this is based off of this, working between Lake County, Clear Lake, and Lakeport as your unified cities, and the unincorporated Lake County. So we have the jurisdictions coming together to make those common decisions around evacuations, looking at the authorities that are in place between the sheriff's office and local law enforcement in the cities. Overall, it is written for the operational area. That is more of a response technical term that is essentially referring to Lake County as a jurisdiction and all things within the county borders. And then that opens it up to support with mutual aid to other counties, state organizations and agencies, as well as federal organizations and agencies. Throughout this document and the plan, we went through and worked with our technical advisory group and these organizations to understand what those response actions are and looking through the different lead agencies, support agencies, and identifying those key activations and elements that are required for an evacuation procedure before, during, and also the return after an evacuation. Additionally, we worked through different evacuation strategies, such as intersection traffic control, coordination, phased evacuations, use of barriers, designated markers, high-low sirens. All of them have pros and cons and have different elements of when and how they can be implemented throughout an evacuation. And this plan details those in order to make those decisions quickly for those responders in the moment of an evacuation. Other considerations that we go into with this plan are evacuations of the schools, working closely with the different school districts to understand their process and procedures and make sure that is coordinated into this. Individuals with disabilities and other access and functional needs, making sure we have considerations for those members of our community, and we're talking through the different resources that are available or would quickly need to be requested in an evacuation, as well as evacuation for animals, including small animals that are part of your personal family that you're evacuating with, to large animals and livestock, working with the agricultural pass and how that is a part of the evacuation process when it comes to large animals in the county. Other components that come tied in directly to an evacuation is the agreement on a temporary evacuation point. So this is when you are getting individuals out of the immediate area to what we call that TEP, temporary evacuation point. That point is not necessarily, it is not, as you can see in the definition, a shelter. It is getting them out immediately and then getting them to another resource area, which would be a shelter most likely, or other resource centers or resources available to them to get out of the area and then have what we call wraparound services, food, water, shelter for that. So having those agreed upon language and terminology helps us have a conversation in the moment to understand where resources are going and who's responsible for those services at each location. As we get through the plan, we also have a quick action checklist. As you can imagine, there is a lot of components that go into evacuation planning and that response. So this response document is technical, it is large, and so how do we do that very quickly? We have this checklist for those responders to be able to essentially grab and go as a good reminder. And then we have evacuation maps that were created as part of this project. One note with evacuation maps, I'll come back to those in a second, is also, as we've mentioned, wildfires can move from any location in all directions. And so it is not, if you think like hurricane or tsunami type of evacuation where it's always pointed in one direction, these are proposed evacuation routes recommended because you might need to go north one time and south the next. And so identifying with that flexibility, but creating awareness to those routes and movements that are potential for an evacuation. Additionally, we work through components that could come to an evacuation around additional contingent routes that need to be created or identified in a specific evacuation, alternative fuels, and what would that potentially look like to make sure we have the ability to continue to move and flow traffic and people out of the area. As well, in the world of emergency management, we like a lot of acronyms, and so trying to simplify this document but also keep it aware to all those who are taking a look at it. The other piece of this plan and part of this project was preparedness. And so how do we continue to make sure the community and those who are in Lake County know what to do in an evacuation? There are three main pieces that we worked through as a part of this plan, but also communicated throughout our different presentations with public outreach and public meetings that we've had throughout the course of this project to know your zone, make a plan, be informed. So today I will go through that very high level, but I do encourage each of you who are there today and participating and seeing this information, please make sure you're also doing this because that's what makes this plan effective. Know your zone. Lake County uses Genesis Protect and has actually done a very good job of how they have outlined their evacuation zones because there is logic to the naming of these. Each zone has a 3-letter indicator. It's going to give you an idea of where you're at to local communities, and then the numbering starts essentially at the north part of the county and works its way south. So even if you didn't know what MNF evacuation zone number 24 is, it should give you an idea that that's in the Mendocino National Forest towards the northern part of the county. You can find your zone by going to the Lake County Sheriff's website, the Office of Emergency Services, or going to genesisprotect.com and typing in your address or your location. The Genesis Protect gives you information when there is a fire, so it can show you the radius of the fire, the percentage contained, if there's any specific information to that fire, and also tied to the zones, if there are any zones. Please note this is not an active fire. This was taken from August of this year. It also is going to give you any closures. So at the time this was taken, Mesa Drive was closed. And so if you were in this area trying to get out, this gives you information to be able to move outside of that zone and move through this with knowledge ahead of time, coming to a closure. Ultimately, each individual is responsible for making their own plan and understanding their own needs and resources. And so part of that is knowing what those potential evacuation routes are. As I mentioned, we identified potential primary, potential secondary routes through this planning process and through our mapping capability. You can see those at a high level here. And then went through from a community standpoint, looking more at those potential secondary routes.
Just real briefly.
Yeah, I have a question. Can you go, because I was just looking at the map, and I don't think that Butts Canyon is not highlighted as the additional way out of the county, is that right? It's listed as a secondary evacuation route, but it's not highlighted.
Okay.
Is it?
And that was, just to clarify this, Butts Canyon Road?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I will take note of that.
Okay, thank you. I think it's just
Was there
important to have every single route out of the county highlighted, if it's a secondary or primary route.
Can I say
Yes,
something?
please.
On that issue too, because I was going to bring it up a little bit later, so thank you, Jessica. But I know that at one time I was told, not Socrates, but Western Mine Road was also considered a way out. It's steep, and but if there's no other way out, there's about only 2 miles that is not paved at this moment, but that was not listed either on your list, as well as when you were naming stoplights on the main corridors out, you missed one in Middletown.
Thank you for that. I will go back.
That was at Ward Lawn
confirm those.
Highway 29. That stoplight was missed for manning it to keep traffic flowing.
Thank you so much for that. I will make sure that we get that added to the report.
Thank you.
Go ahead and continue.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. We did do our mapping also down to a community level to give those indications, because it is hard to see at an overall county view. And so I know we received some additional feedback on some of the community maps. I will make sure that we review that as well and make sure those are finalized and updated as appropriate. Each of those community maps are attached to the overall evacuation plan.
Yeah, I have a question. Can we go back to that last slide one more?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so we spent a whole year working on the Soda Bay corridor evacuation plans, and it's very similar to this. But what I don't like is the area of Soda Bay being cut, kind of going in and out of maps. I know it's easy to do rectangles, but that is a really important evacuation route on Soda Bay Road, and it's put in the North Shore map. So I would like to see communities all contained in one map. There's actually a section where it's in 3 maps, and that is a primary evacuation route for that community.
Thank you for that. I'm making a note of that, and we will definitely go back and take a look.
All right. Please continue. And thank you for, looking at it and wanting to update some of the corrections and whatnot. Appreciate you taking care of that feedback.
Absolutely. We want this to work for your community, so I want to make sure we get that accurate. Last section on this was to be informed and making sure that we were highlighting those existing emergency communications and elements that are available to members of the community, specifically like co-alerts and the integration there with emergency messaging, emergency notifications, integrated public alert and warning, or known as IPAWS, emergency alert systems, or EIS. And so using the resources that the county has and promoting those. Additionally, we promoted city resources as well, but really through that unified command, all working together so we have consistent messaging across the county. We also spent a lot of time talking about potential additional communications, and so those go through in the document where we talk about, law enforcement communications, coordinating with Caltrans and the changeable message signs that are on the highway, to make sure that we can communicate in key locations to try to limit or reduce, bottlenecks or traffic congestion by getting messages out at key locations throughout the county before someone gets past it and they're not able to turn around or take another alternate route. So we talk through those components as well as reach out to local businesses and talked with Lake Transit and their involvement as well in the transportation and communication around that component. I just want to say thank you for the time to present to you and the ability to work with Lake County on this project. It has been great. We will take definitely your feedback into consideration and review those and work with Lake APC to finalize this plan. But thank you so much for your time today. I will answer any other questions that there are.
Supervisor Sabate and then Supervisor Owen.
Yeah, thank you for updating this document. Just a couple of questions, Ms. Newton. In the school area, would it be possible to add the population? Because it's vastly different, the level of resources that may be needed on an oncoming fire, especially I'm thinking of the Lower Lake area that has the largest school district with the high school and Lower Lake Elementary right next to each other. Some schools are by themselves. It's just a vastly different thing. Lucerne probably has the smallest school, then you go to Upper Lake and that's completely different. So it would be nice to see the populations to kind of really guide those who are looking through the document and understanding what is going on for those school districts. You mentioned the ag pass, and I appreciate that, but I didn't see where it belongs in the type of closure. So you had the hard closures, the soft closure, but it never speaks about ag pass being able to go through any of those closures. It would be nice to add that in there. I don't know if it's all three. I don't know if the hard closure means no ag pass, but it would be nice to put it in there. And then something just on the side, and maybe it's a horrible request, but to me, there's value in having this work done for wildfire preparation, but also do you catalog and have a list of roads that have kind of like a one exit only where it creates, because I mean, I appreciate that you have vulnerable populations. I'm looking for vulnerable geographic locations where then we can have a list of roads that maybe can help us get grant funding to do secondary evacuation out of those areas. I don't see a list of that. I see only a list of evacuation roads, but not sensitive areas that we may need to pay attention to.
Yes, and if I may, on the one way in, one way out access component, there is a tie and a connection to the safety element of the general plan and the work that's being done to create that component. We've stayed in contact with your consultants who have been working on that to make sure we're looking at that consistently. We also collected that information in our survey and provided that to OES versus necessarily in the plan. I can look at adding that as an attachment if that makes sense for the plan in its entirety.
I would say as long as we have that list, that I think is the best thing. I don't want to put it so many places that it hurts people's ability to get insurance or anything like that. So I just wanted to make sure we had a list.
Thank you.
Helen?
Okay. Well, you've done a lot of work on this, and I'm pretty impressed. You've done a great job, and I want to thank you for that. And I realize it's, you redo it every 4 years. During that 4-year time, could we add or alter it at all? Add to it, or is it the solid document until 4 years from now?
My recommendation would be that this plan, as we turn it back over, will be with Lake Area Planning Council as a product for them. And then should be tied to and connected to the Lake County Emergency Operation Plan as an annex there. And then I would recommend that anytime there is, especially if you occur an evacuation or there's major changes, to do, a review and make amendments to those documents as needed in that time frame in between.
Perfect. So it is a living document. It can change.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. Because I know in the, let me see. I think Middletown has a fire safe council too. I've been to their meetings. I don't know if they're calling them the Anderson Springs, if that's what they're calling the Anderson Springs. So I'll have to check into that. The livestock passes, which I believe are on 13 and 41. We're working on that right now for some more resolutions in that area. So I'm working with OES and the fire departments for that particular issue, especially the large livestock. So that was primarily why I was asking. Oh, you had mentioned, which was a great idea, being able to, with the vulnerable populations and the people that do not have access to vehicles, if need be, you had mentioned school buses, the use of school buses to get them out. Is that something that the schools are aware of? Do they know about this? Is there agreements? And who would be driving them? Would it be the bus drivers or would it be county personnel? How does that work?
Yes, ma'am. That was in a conversation with the school districts. I know that there is a Red Flag Day program that exists today, where when there is a Red Flag Day, they're pre-staging those buses, utilizing their bus drivers where applicable. You do have to have the right licensing and certification to drive the school bus and work through that. Some of this is intended to be a framework, so that way in those specific moments, they can understand the exact needs and the exact resources available to implement those. So the school bus component is available. If the school is in session, there and needs to be an evacuation, they will be obviously evacuating the schools. So there is kind of that balance back and forth between what is occurring in the moment versus what is potentially available and an option and opportunity.
Sure, and then that's kind of, I understood, if school's in session, most of the fire, or many of the fires happen during the summer when they're not in session, and I thought that was pretty brilliant. But I was just wondering who would be driving and if there is a list of like routes and if, the school bus drivers are aware of this and basically just, looking to see if this could really actually be implemented.
I'm not 100% sure if there were necessarily identified routes that would be exact, but it would be that conversation with the school district as their availability and to support the request coming from, that operational area to make that recommendation to need it to work through that.
Well, thank you. I think that's it.
I know that they used the school buses for the cache fire because it was very close to the Lower Lake area with the schools, and they were dropping them off in front of Burns Valley. So something was initiated for that one. And
Perfect.
I'm sure there's learning moments from every single time they do that.
Right. Thank you.
And we also used them in the river and ranch fire during the summer.
Very cool.
All right. With that, we'll go ahead and open it up to the public if there's anyone that would like to make comment on this.
Tom Lasik again, just real quick, I support the idea of getting the secondary the secondary evacuations. I'd like to see maybe a progress report, since this report comes out every 4 years. So if you identify vulnerabilities, what changed from the last time to this time? So for example, if you had a map of all the one-way ins, one-way outs here in 2025, if we do this in 2029, how many do we fix? If you have a secondary evacuation route that's not 4290 compliant, how many did we fix in the last 4 years? You have all these plans have been going on for a long time, but I keep seeing the same things on the plans, but not necessarily a roadmap to get them fixed. So I would just suggest getting some sort of status update the next time this comes out, based on what we had before and where we are now and where we plan to be 4 years from now. Thank you.
Can I respond to that really quick?
Yes.
Okay, so I know that one of mine, the Western Mine Road, is not 4290 compliant. There are sections of the road that are 12 feet wide, and there's a telephone pole there, keeping us from moving it wider. But most of that is paved, and I would like to see within the next 4 years to have that completely paved where it was 42 compliant.
Any other public comment? Any on Zoom? All right, we'll bring it back to the board and close this item, and we appreciate the presentation. We appreciate getting through this, and I don't know if you have anything.
No, just thank you, Faith.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
All right.